and continue on reading in the Runaway Shadows. This story is The Runaway Shadows. The Frost King came down to breakfast one morning in a merry mood. "Do you know what day it is?" he said to his son Jack. "No, your majesty," answered Jack, who was busily eating fried icicles. "It is my birthday," he said. "Ah!" cried Jack, springing to his feet. "Then it's the coldest day of the year." "Exactly," replied his father. "So today, my dear boy, you may mix with the earth people and play your pranks upon them to your heart's content. Many exposed noses and ears will be ready for your nip, and many toes and fingers to pinch. So you will easily manage to keep busy." "I'll start at once," exclaimed Jack, "for I do not wish to miss an hour of this merry day." Said the little Prince of Thumbia, "I want to go out and play." "It is extremely cold, your highness," said the chief nurse uneasily. "That doesn't matter," answered the prince. "I have furs, so I will go outdoors to play, and my cousin, the Lady Lendiva, will go with me." "Our man-at-arms declared it as the coldest day of the year," remarked the chief nurse. "And naughty Jack Frost will be abroad." The Prince of Thumbia stamped his small foot. "The furs!" he cried impatiently. So the chief nurse sighed and summoned her maids, to whom she gave orders to fetch the furs. The prince and his dainty cousin, the little Lady Lendiva, were wrapped from head to foot in soft, rich furs, so when the maids were through with them, only their eyes and the tips of their noses were exposed. Then a shivering guardsman opened the front door of the castle, just wide enough to get through, and they joined their mittened hands and walked into the big courtyard. The sun shone brightly, but so intense was the cold that even the soldiers who guarded the walls had gone into their little turret houses, and none had dared brave the severe weather save the two self-willed children. So they toddled across the stone pavement. The sun cast dark shadows behind them, which clung close to the children's heels wherever they went, fast or slow. The furs succeeded in keeping out the cold, but the prince and the little Lady Lendiva found little to interest them in the courtyard, and began to realize the folly of venturing out. Then merry Jack Frost came that way, and upon seeing the youngsters, decided to pinch their ears, but then he found they were covered up. Next he thought he would nip their noses, but at first attempt the two little ones withdrew them into their furs. Jack Frost was really puzzled. He couldn't get at them anywhere. Just at this time, the prince and his cousin saw a snowbird sitting upon the battlements and ran across the courtyard to catch it. When they moved, Jack Frost noticed the shadows following them, and a clever idea came into his head. "I shall freeze the shadows," he said to himself with a laugh. So while the little ones stood still to watch the snowbird, naughty Jack breathed softly upon the two shadows, which were holding hands exactly as the children were. Soon they became solid and rounded out in form, for the only reason shadows were flat and helpless is because they're not solid. Being now frozen into shape, they became greatly interested in themselves, and Jack Frost stopped long enough to put mischievous notions into their heads. "Let's run away," whispered the prince's shadow to that of the one of Lady Lendiva. "All right, let's," was the soft answer. They glanced over their shoulders, and then they gave a look at the prince and his cousin, to whom they knew very well they belonged. But the children were intently watching the bird and had no thought that what was happening to their shadows. Noting this, the two shadows slowly glided away, and then leaped the great wall with ease and ran in the direction of the forest of Burzee. Jack Frost stood watching them as they moved swiftly over the snow, and he laughed joyfully at the success of his mischief. The runaway shadows never stopped until they had reached the forest and gone some distance among the trees. Then, indeed, they paused to rest and recover their breaths, but each still held the hands of the other and kept close together. Kata, the great tiger of Burzee, lay upon the limb of a tree and sleepily opened his eyes from time to time to look about him. Suddenly he pricked up his ears and began moving his long tail from side to side. Ah, the Prince of Thumbia and the Lady Ladiva had come to the forest, he growled softly. I can see their shadows, so the children must be just behind that clump of bushes. Surely it was my good luck that brought them here, for I am hungry today. They will do excellently for dinner. Then he thrust his sharp claws from the sheaths and bared his big yellow teeth and gave a mighty spring that landed him exactly behind the clump of bushes where the children, according to their shadows, ought to have been. But he struck the frozen ground and found no one there, and the shadows laughed at him. You were very foolish this time, Kata, they cried, and when the king turned upon them fiercely, they ran away through the forest and left him. Soon after that they met a rile, which asked, Why have you run away from your owners? For sport, replied the prince's shadow. And because we got tired of taking after someone else, added the Lady Ladiva's shadow. Ah, I see, remarked Ryle, looking at them with a wise expression. You are frozen solid now and think that you amount to something. But you don't. When the weather changes and you've thawed out, you will fade into the air and become lost forever. That'll be bad, and the children will have no shadows after that. And that's bad, too. Can't you see you've acted foolishly? The shadows hung their heads and looked ashamed. My advice to you, continued the Ryle, is to return to the castle as quickly as possible and join yourself to the prince and the little girl as you were before. It is far better to tag along with those high-born children than to become nothing at all. And in truth, you are only shadows who cannot expect to become anything better, although you will grow bigger as your masters do. For a moment there was silence, then Lady Ladiva's shadow whispered to her companion, The Ryle is right. Let us return at once. Very well, returned the prince's shadow. We have had a good run and been independent for once in our lives, but I will not dare to fade into the air and become nothing at all. So they turned around and went back to the castle. After the shadows had left them, the little prince and his cousin decided it was too cold to remain outdoors, and the snowbird had flown away. So they returned to the big entrance of the castle, and the guards let them in. But scarcely had they reached the hall and allowed the maid to remove their furs, when a loud shout was heard, and a cavalcade of horsemen rode up to the castle and dismounted in the courtyard. With them was a splendid carriage, drawn by 4 milk-white steeds. The leader of these men, who were all noblemen and couriers, entered the hall of the castle, and having bowed low before the prince, he said, I am grieved to announce that His Majesty, the King, has died. His nearest of kin are yourself, the prince, and his cousin, the Lady Ladiva. But since you are a boy and she is a girl, we have decided to offer you the rule of this mighty kingdom. If you will graciously ride with us to the city, you shall be crowned before sunset. Then he kneeled before the prince and awaited his answer. I am sorry for the king. My good uncle is dead, said the boy. But often I had thought I should like to be king myself. So I thank you all, and shall return with you to the city. The chief nurse then replaced his soft furs and walked him out to the entrance of the carriage, which stood waiting. But then, when he stood in the bright sunshine, one of the couriers exclaimed, Why, the prince has no shadow! At this, all eyes were turned upon the boy, and they saw that he alone of them all cast no shadow upon the pavement. Silence fell upon them, till one, more bold than the rest, said, It will never do to make him a king, for when it is known that he has no shadow, the people will lose all respect for him and consider him less than human. That is true, said another. No one would obey a king so poor that he has no shadow. For this reason, declared the leader of the party, we shall make Lady Ladiva queen, and set her to reign over the kingdom in place of this unfortunate prince. To this all were agreed, though many expressed regret. So the prince, who had been fully as astonished as the rest of the loss of his shadow as any of the other, was led back into the castle, and the Lady Ladiva brought forth in his stead. But when the girl came into the sunshine, the couriers were shocked to discover that she had no more shadow than the prince. Thereupon they were puzzled about how to act, and finally decided to return to the city and report that the matter to the Earl High Low, who was the chief man in all the kingdom. When this great and wise statesman heard that neither the prince nor his cousin cast a shadow in the sunlight, he refused to believe the report and announced that he would himself go to the castle of Thumbia and investigate the matter. And while he was upon his way, the runaway shadows stole back to the castle and sought out the boy and the girl, resolving never to leave again. The warmth of the room soon drew the frost from the shadows and rendered them so limp and flat that they were really glad to stick close to the heels of their owners. The Earl of High-Low presently arrived with a great train of couriers and attendants, and at once requested the Prince Thumbia to step out into the sunshine of the courtyard. This the prince did, feeling sadly the humiliation of having no shadow. But behold! No sooner came him into the sun than he cast a long black shadow behind him, and the couriers applauded his triumph, and with loud shouts hailed him as their king. The records state that for many years the new king walked daily within the gardens of his palace in order to make sure that he had not again lost his shadow. Even after he grew into manhood and by wise rule gained the love and respect of his subjects, whenever he happened to walk out with Lady Ladiva, now his queen, they were both accustomed to glance over their shoulders with anxious looks. But the shadows, having learned wisdom from the Ryl, never deserted them again, and Jack Frost, having new tricks to play, forgot all about the annoyance he had once caused His Royal Highness the King. The original version appearance of the Runaway Shadows is unknown, but it was reprinted in the Baum Bugle in April 1962.